Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are opening up the files on a financial puzzle unfolding in St. Johns County, Florida. And this is one of the highest performing school districts in the entire state.
It is. In November 2025, their teacher contract negotiations they hit a wall, a complete standstill.
A formal impasse.
And for you, our listener, the central question is just why? I mean, just a year before this, in November 2024, the community voted overwhelmingly for a big property tax hike.
Right.
They dedicated millions of local dollars specifically to help with teacher salaries. The public really stepped up.
So if the community put their money on the table, why are the educators, represented by the St. John's Education Association, the SJEA, why are they now rejecting the new contract? Why are they basically saying it's just not enough?
Well, that's our mission today. We're going to unpack the sources to understand the two different pots of money in play here, how that first tax boost was actually distributed, and why the brutally high cost of living there is really forcing this painful standoff.
And the thing that just jumped out at me immediately was the scale of the raises they rejected. We're talking about increases from, what, $647 to maybe $1,000 a year?
For most teachers, yeah. It was
Yeah.
a 1.2 to 1.9% raise,
Mm-hmm.
and teachers just said an emphatic no.
And this is after the community had mandated that huge investment in them. It's a disconnect.
It's a huge disconnect.
Okay, so let's start with that voter mandate, because it was historic. Voters passed that property tax hike in 2024 to boost pay, hire more teachers, and invest in school security.
This was supposed to be the great fix,
Exactly.
and it was a substantial victory. It absolutely provided immediate, significant relief. The sources show the salary supplements were finalized in July of 2025. But, crucially, the funding was structured to fix a very specific problem in Florida called salary compression.
Salary compression. Okay, you mentioned that. For our listener who maybe doesn't deal with HR talks, what does that actually mean? Why was it so important to fix?
So think of it as a squeezing of the pay scale in the middle. Florida has, for years, focused state money on boosting starting teacher salaries.
So the brand new teachers get a bump.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is great, but it meant veteran teachers, someone with 20 years in the classroom, they often found their pay hadn't really grown that much. They were making just a little bit more than a teacher fresh out of college.
So the local property tax was specifically designed to decompress that, to spread things out.
Precisely. And the numbers, they really show it.
Yeah.
Teachers with, say, 0 to 5 years of experience got a total boost of $4,500. But the veterans, the ones with 21 or more years, they got the largest boost, a really significant $8,888 added to their annual pay.
Wow.
That money really helped stabilize the system and reward those career educators.
Okay, so that seems like an enormous win for the teachers, which again brings us back to the puzzle. Why, when they went into the 2025 negotiations, the ones that led to this impasse, did they reject the district's next proposed raise?
Yeah.
Is there a difference between the voter money and this contract money?
That is the essential clarification we have to make. That huge boost, the $4,500 to almost $9,000, that was a temporary, locally funded supplement. It's wonderful. But the union, the SJEA, they recognize it comes with a ticking clock. It has an expiration date.
An expiration date.
Yeah, the tax measure is on a 4-year cycle. It has to be reapproved by voters to continue.
So the supplement is fantastic for now, but it's really more of a temporary bonus, not a permanent change to their salary.
Precisely. It's an incentive, not a foundation. What the SJEA was negotiating in late 2025 was an increase to their permanent state-funded base contract salary.
And that's where the district offered those tiny increases, the $600 to $1,000.
That's the one. And it was promptly voted down by the union in October.
The difference is just huge. One is temporary and local. The other is the permanent foundation they have to rely on. And the district's response to that rejection in November 2025 was, well, it was pretty firm.
Oh, it was. They just reiterated the same low offer. Their lead negotiators said they were, and this is a quote, certainly mindful of all the tiers, but this is where we're at financially.
Ooh.
That phrase really sums up what negotiators call positional bargaining. Each side just stakes out a rigid position. But to understand why they're so dug in, we have to get into the financial reality.
It feels like we have two separate pots of money and two separate disappointments happening at once. Let's look at that $60 million pot from the voters. Where did that money actually go?
Right, because when the money was collected, it wasn't exclusively for teacher salaries. The sources show that 85% was earmarked for salaries, which, yes, included teachers, but also paraprofessionals and aides.
Okay, so other instructional staff.
And then the remaining 15% was for health and safety initiatives. Things like hiring more nurses, more school resource officers.
Wait, hold on. So 15% of the tax money that was passed because the community wanted to help teachers? It went to fund things like school security, which the district would have to fund anyway.
There's how a lot of teachers saw it. It was
Yeah.
probably a necessary compromise to get the measure passed, but it absolutely contributed to this bait and switch feeling.
I can see that. They feel like the community voted for them, but the money got spread out across other district needs.
Exactly. And this is all happening at the exact moment. The cost of living there is just crushing any benefit they thought they were getting.
Okay, let's connect the dots there. What's the average teacher salary in St. Johns County?
It's about $52,500 a year.
52.5. And if we look at the reality on the ground, I'm looking at the MIT living wage calculator, it gives us a pretty chilling benchmark. A single adult with no children needs $54,323 a year just to meet basic needs in that county.
Think about that gap.
Yeah.
Just think about it. On average, a single teacher in this top-tier district cannot afford to live there, not even before you factor in the temporary supplements.
You're already underwater.
And it's completely untenable for families. A single parent with one child needs over $91,000 to make ends meet.
So that massive supplement from the 2024 tax, the $4,000 to $9,000, it wasn't a raise. It was a desperate effort to just close a massive widening gap to stay afloat.
It was a catch-up payment. And this takes us right to the property tax paradox, which was the most frustrating anecdote we found in the sources.
This story really crystallizes the whole thing.
It does. We read this quote from a veteran teacher who pointed out that her own property taxes went up by $300 to $400 a year because of the very tax that was supposed to help her.
And since she's a veteran, she was only offered that small base contract raise, the one under $1,000. She said the tax increase alone was taking back more than half of her proposed new raise.
When you hear that, you can understand why the emotional dam broke. How can you stay at a bargaining table when you feel like you're being asked to fight for a raise that's canceled out by the very taxes funding the system?
You're just running in place financially.
And then you compound that frustration with the hidden cost of insurance. The union wasn't just worried about paychecks. They were looking at health insurance hikes.
That's a huge piece of this.
It is. The SJEA was afraid that proposed premium increases could be anywhere from $52 up to $720. For some teachers, that insurance hike was going to be higher than the small raise the district was offering.
So they would literally be losing money. Their take-home pay would go down.
They could actually end up with a pay cut on paper, yes.
That puts this whole local battle into, into its essential broader context. They are trying to solve a $1 billion statewide problem with a $60 million local Band-Aid.
Exactly. We can't forget where Florida stands nationally. For 2 straight years, Florida has ranked 50th in the nation for average teacher pay, dead last. And despite all the rhetoric about investment, when you adjust for inflation, the average Florida teacher salary has actually decreased by nearly 13% over the last decade.
That is just a staggering statistic. It really shows that the state's funding formula isn't keeping up with the cost of living in places like St. Johns County.
Not at all. And they're stuck in this regional competition for talent. I mean, neighboring Clay County offered 0 raises to 45% of its teachers. That puts huge pressure on St. John's to stay competitive.
So how do they break the deadlock, this current standoff, this positional bargaining where the district just says, here's the offer again? That's not a path forward.
No. The sources consistently recommend a pivot to what's called interest-based bargaining, or IBB.
So instead of arguing over that 1.9% number, they focus on the why.
That's it. What are our shared interests? We all want teacher retention, we want fiscal health, and most of all, we want high student success. Start the conversation there.
And if you shift the dynamic like that, you can explore more creative, non-monetary value, things beyond just a percentage raise.
And there's so many great ideas out there. I mean, in Oregon, the union negotiated for 13 flexible, undesignated leave days. That is a massive boost for job satisfaction and work-life balance.
At basically no extra cost to the budget.
Right. It addresses burnout without hitting the payroll. Or look at Cherry Creek, Colorado. They created these professional growth pathways, offering veteran teachers an extra $5,000 a year just to research new teaching methods.
That's brilliant. It keeps your most experienced, highest paid people engaged and gives them a non-salary incentive.
It's fantastic. And another one was just contractually guaranteeing planning time during the workday. All these things require trust and transparency.
But the need for a sustainable multi-year plan is it's paramount. Which brings us to the cautionary tale of San Francisco.
Oh, yeah?
They gave these historic raises in 2023 and 2024, and everyone celebrated.
Yes. But that initial success created a completely unsustainable budget crisis. It forced the district to then come back and propose a tiny 2% raise that was contingent on benefit cuts.
It just proves you can't throw one-time money at a systemic, long-term funding problem.
You can't.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, and for St. Johns County? The core takeaway here is that the local tax increase, it was a massive, necessary Band-Aid.
But it's failing. It's failing because it's trying to fix a systemic problem driven by insufficient state-level funding and a soaring regional cost of living.
The frustration we're seeing is the collision point between that unsustainable economic reality and this rigid positional bargaining.
And the only sustainable path forward is, well, it's multi-pronged. You need radical budget transparency, you need creative non-monetary contract items, and this is the most important part, you need a commitment to joint political action.
Meaning the district and the unions stop fighting each other.
And they commit to advocating together for state-level reform.
Specifically for a funding formula from Tallahassee that actually accounts for these regional cost of living differences.
That's the only systemic change that can stop these annual standoffs. The cost of failure is just too high. You measure it in teacher turnover and ultimately in declining student achievement.
Okay, so a final provocative thought for you to consider.
Yeah, think about this. If the current teacher salary, even with the voter-approved temporary supplement, still leaves a single adult unable to meet their basic living needs in St. Johns County, who is truly expected to staff their high-performing schools 4 years from now, when that temporary tax money expires and has to be put up for renewal.